When we think of a predator, we picture the loud, arrogant aggressor. But the most dangerous ones don't announce themselves, They disguise themselves as the victim.
And before you know it, your reality is completely dismantled. And you're apologizing to the person who is destroying you.
Welcome to the debate. Today, we are opening the door on a deeply hidden, really chilling psychological landscape. We're looking at the world of covert narcissism.
Right, and it's something so many people just entirely miss.
Exactly. We're examining a fundamental tension in how we understand this pathology from two very different clinical perspectives. The central question is the core threat of a covert narcissist found in their highly calculated, predatory masking of grandiosity to manipulate power, or is it
Or is the true danger rooted in the invisible emotional destruction, the reality warping environment they inflict on the victim?
right? I argue that covert narcissism is a highly calculated, predatory system of control. Individuals weaponize pity and passive aggression to extract power, all while hiding behind a mask of introversion.
And I argue that focusing on their calculation completely misses the point. The true danger is the insidious psychological toll on the victim, the invisible red flags that induce self-doubt and completely destroy a person's sanity.
So if we want to truly understand this pathology, we have to start by aggressively stripping away the disguise. When you dive into the clinical literature, covert narcissism, which you'll sometimes hear called vulnerable or closet narcissism, is fundamentally built on the exact same psychological core as overt narcissism.
Yes, the exact same core.
You have the severely inflated sense of self-importance, the constant, bottomless need for admiration, and a complete structural lack of empathy. But unlike the grandiose narcissist who demands the spotlight, flexes their wealth, or openly dominates a room, the covert narcissist operates as a stealth predator.
They really do fly completely under the radar.
They do. They use introversion, shyness, and even supposed depression as a sophisticated, calculated mask. Beneath that quiet, self-effacing exterior is an incredibly fragile ego that is desperately maintaining an internal fantasy world of absolute, unquestionable superiority. They genuinely believe they are entirely above everyone else in the room.
Right, it's all internal for them.
Exactly. But because they lack the overconfidence to demand that recognition, they extract their control through covert hostility. It's deliberate sabotage, it's intentional underachievement, and it's assuming the perpetual role of the victim to force others into serving them. I look at this through the lens of a behavioral profiler. This is a sadistic, calculated behavioral pattern designed to gain absolute control without ever leaving fingerprints.
Well, I come at it from a completely different way, deeply grounded in the trauma it leaves behind. While the pathology of the predator is clinically fascinating to profile, analyzing their internal fantasy world completely distracts from the actual crime scene.
The crime scene being the relationship?
The crime scene is the victim's mind. The covert narcissist's ultimate weapon isn't just their disguise, it is how they actively exploit the genuine neurological empathy of their targets. They create an environment that is the absolute textbook definition of crazy-making.
Yeah, the exhaustion is just palpable.
It's total nervous system exhaustion. Victims of covert narcissists don't just feel manipulated, they feel like they are literally losing their grip on reality. It is a constant, terrifying state of walking on eggshells just to avoid triggering the narcissist's extreme hypersensitivity to the mildest, most constructive feedback.
Which is, of course, completely invisible to outsiders.
That is exactly what makes it so uniquely dangerous, and why my focus is entirely on the victim's experience. Because the abuse is executed through subtle sighs, sideways glances, and shifting blame rather than shouting or physical violence, friends and family almost never believe the victim.
Right, they just see the nice guy.
Yes, outsiders see the narcissist's humble, self-effacing public persona, and they assume the victim's just overreacting. This leaves the target profoundly isolated, questioning their own mental health, and completely trapped in what we call a trauma bond.
The isolation is definitely the perfect cover, but I want to look closely at the mechanics of how they manufacture that humble image in the first place. Think about the bait they use. Wait, look at how they use pity.
Oh, the pity plays are endless.
A grandiose narcissist will hook you by showing off their charisma, their success, or their intelligence, right? The covert narcissist hooks you with self-deprecation. They will look at you, usually early in a relationship or friendship, and say something like, "I'm such a loser," or "I'm just a burden to everyone."
Or, I can never do anything right.
Exactly. It looks entirely like vulnerability, but mechanistically, it's a highly efficient tool to fish for compliments and corner you into a position where you are obligated to validate them. It is an active extraction of what the literature calls narcissistic supply, which is essentially the emotional fuel they need to survive. Instead of getting that fuel from applause, they get it by forcing you to constantly prop up their self-esteem.
That's not depression, that's weaponized guilt. You are absolutely right that they use statements like, "Everyone always abandons me," or "I guess I'm just impossible to love."
Right.
But I need to emphasize how this functions on the receiving end. While their distress and their tears might actually feel real to them in that exact moment because they do experience high neuroticism and intense internal shame, those emotions function as a relational recruitment mechanism.
A recruitment mechanism. That's a good way to put it.
They are taking a picture of genuine psychological distress and placing it directly in the path of a highly empathetic person's natural caretaking instincts. It pulls the victim into a caretaking role, effectively binding them to the abuser under the guise of being a supportive partner. The victim thinks they are healing a wounded bird, but they are actually locking themselves in a cage.
Wait, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. Are you saying that when they are crying and saying, "I'm such a burden," they aren't actually looking for a solution to their sadness?
No, not at all. They don't want to be fixed. If you try to offer a practical solution to their depression, they will reject it, because being the victim is the very mechanism that keeps you tethered to them.
Which brings me perfectly to why I compare the covert narcissist to an anglerfish.
Oh, the deep-sea fish with the little light?
Yes, this is the exact behavioral profile. Think about how an anglerfish hunts in the deep ocean. It hides its massive, dangerous jaws in the pitch black. The only thing the prey sees in the dark is this tiny, glowing, incredibly vulnerable light.
Wow. That is a chilling comparison.
The victim swims toward it to investigate, out of empathy or curiosity. And by the time they realize the light is attached to a predator, the jaws are already shut. That glowing lure, that's the covert narcissist's fake depression.
Right.
If we know from the clinical literature that they simultaneously retreat into an internal fantasy world where they believe they are vastly superior to the person trying to help them, doesn't that prove their displays of shame are just calculated emotional blackmail? They don't actually want help, they want servitude.
Well, I hear you on the mechanics of the trap, but if we just focus on the cold calculation of the architect, we risk missing how chaotic and emotionally dysregulated the environment actually becomes once the jaws snap shut.
Fair point.
The pity only gets them through the front door. Once you are committed to helping them, the entire dynamic shifts. The narcissist now has to exert dominance to keep you there, but because they fear exposure and lack overt courage, they don't shout or demand.
No, they pivot entirely to passive aggression and micro-insults. Deep, heavy sigh, and the sadistic nature of that passive aggression is just staggering.
It really is.
It is so incredibly frustrating to analyze because they categorically refuse to express anger directly. They rely on the silent treatment, sometimes for days, over a perceived slight they won't even name. They rely on chronic sulking.
Yes, the atmosphere just becomes completely suffocating.
And they will give backhanded compliments that are perfectly engineered to sting. For example, they'll look at their partner and say, "You look great today, much better than usual."
Ouch, yes.
It's designed to wound. But notice the mechanism. It leaves the victim completely responsible for figuring out what's wrong. They withhold information, they forget promises, and they leave a wake of intentional inefficiency. It's a hostility that is entirely deniable. If you accuse them of being mean, they just point to the literal words and claim innocence.
This is exactly what trips victims up. This is the absolute core of covert gaslighting.
Right.
When the victim finally builds up the courage to confront those micro-insults or the suffocating silent treatment, the narcissist immediately flips the script. They say, "I was just joking," or "You're way too sensitive," or You're imagining things.
The plausible deniability is just infuriating.
It is a systematic, day-by-day denial of the victim's reality. The narcissist elevates themselves to a position of calm moral authority, saying things like, "I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed that you're acting this way," which makes the victim feel like a paranoid, unstable villain.
Which is so destructive.
If you're listening right now and you're chronically exhausted, if you spend your entire commute home mentally rehearsing exactly how to say hello so you don't trigger a multi-day silent treatment, you are in this trap. The target starts suppressing their own legitimate feelings because they've been conditioned to believe their reactions are excessive.
It's the active destruction of a person's psychological immune system. And I want to push further into how that destruction extends beyond just verbal gaslighting, into profound behavioral manipulation in daily life.
Like what?
Let's look at how they force the victim to carry the physical and emotional load of the relationship through what the clinical literature calls weaponized incompetence. This is a brilliant, albeit intensely dark, tactical maneuver.
Oh yes, the chores.
Right. Think about what actually happens in the household. They will deliberately perform a task so poorly, like loading the dishwasher so the large bowls completely block the spray arm, or conveniently forgetting how to operate the washing machine they've had for 5 years.
So the partner is literally forced to step in and take over.
Exactly. If we just call that laziness, we are missing the underlying mechanism. By forcing you to redo the chore, they aren't just avoiding work. They're psychologically positioning themselves as the aristocrat and you as the hired help.
Right.
It is a mechanism to enforce hierarchy without ever having to demand it out loud. They shift the burdens of daily life onto you while simultaneously punishing you for having expectations of them in the first place.
And I want to unpack exactly what that tactic does to the victim's nervous system. Because you used the term cognitive dissonance earlier in our research, and we need to explain what that actually means in this living room context.
Go ahead.
Cognitive dissonance is the mental agony of holding two completely conflicting realities in your head at the same time. The narcissist plays dumb. They look at you with wide, innocent eyes and say, "Oh, I didn't realize that would upset you," or "I just don't know how to do it as perfectly as you do."
The fake innocence.
So the victim is forced to choose. Reality A, my partner is secretly punishing me and actively trying to drive me insane. Or reality B, my partner is just a bit clueless and I'm being an overly demanding nag.
And obviously they want to believe reality B.
Exactly. The victim naturally wants to believe reality B, so they take on the burden. They choose between living in absolute chaos or becoming an exhausted parent figure to their own partner. And the sickest part, when the victim does take over and inevitably gets frustrated, the narcissist gets to play the ultimate victim again.
Complaining to their friends that their partner is controlling.
Yes, telling everyone their partner is impossible to please. It's an impossible, inescapable trap.
I have to say, I'm not convinced by the idea that we should frame any part of this around their cluelessness, even if it's feigned.
Why not?
I push back on that because it still affords them too much credit for innocence. It's not just about avoiding chores or creating chaos. It's a covert way of broadcasting a message. I am above this, and you exist to serve me.
I see what you're saying.
Their sense of entitlement is completely intact behind the mask. They deeply feel that mundane tasks are beneath their unique, special, misunderstood nature. By manipulating you into serving them, they are silently validating their own hidden grandiosity. It is power extraction, pure and simple.
I understand why you see it as pure power extraction, but we have to look at what happens when the victim finally catches on to this game. What happens when the exhausted partner finally sets a boundary?
Well, that's when it gets explosive.
Right. Or when they implement what therapists call the gray rock strategy, where the victim makes themselves as uninteresting as a gray rock, becoming completely unresponsive and showing zero emotional reaction to the passive aggression. The narcissist doesn't just quietly adjust to the new dynamic.
No, they absolutely do not. And this is where the mask fully drops. This is when we observe what the literature defines as the narcissistic collapse and the subsequent extinction burst.
Both terrifying phases.
Let me break those down. A narcissistic collapse happens when a covert narcissist's carefully maintained facade entirely fails to attract external validation. When their supply of emotional fuel is totally cut off, they literally unravel. Their internal world violently shifts from quiet superiority to absolute existential abandonment terror.
Right.
And that triggers the extinction burst. An extinction burst is a psychological term for when a behavior temporarily gets drastically worse when it stops yielding the desired reward. So the exact same person who relied on the silent treatment and stonewalled you for years suddenly shifts into hyper-obsessive compulsive behavior.
It's a complete 180.
We see terrifying escalations here. Relentless surveillance, creating dozens of burner phones to bypass blocks, stalking your social media, and catastrophic paranoia. They realize they have lost narrative control, and they are desperately, furiously trying to reclaim emotional dominance by any means necessary.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that we should primarily view this phase as a fascinating clinical decompensation of the abuser. Let me tell you why. For the victim, this phase isn't an interesting behavioral shift. It is sheer, unfiltered terror.
I'm not denying the terror.
But the focus matters. The narcissist is firing all their weapons inward, presenting extreme emotional helplessness, sometimes even threatening self-harm to force the victim to respond. And then comes the final, most insidious manipulation of all: hoovering.
Right. Named after the vacuum cleaner.
Exactly. They try to suck the victim back into the relationship. They will show up with tears, with grand gestures, and with what sound like profound apologies. But if you listen closely, if you really parse the words, the apologies are explicitly designed to shift the blame back onto the victim's reaction.
The classic non-apology apology.
Yes. They will say things like, "I'm sorry you feel that way," or "I'm sorry you took it so personally," or "I'm sorry I wasn't patient enough with your anxiety." They are apologizing for your feelings, not their actions.
Right.
This is exactly why trauma-informed therapists urge that full, absolute, no contact is the only way out. Any response to the hoovering, even a negative response telling them to leave you alone, just proves to them that they can still affect you. It feeds their need for attention and immediately restarts the cycle of abuse.
That's an incredible breakdown of the trap. Though I would frame our ultimate defense differently when we look at the entire behavioral cycle.
How so?
If we want to truly arm people against this, we have to recognize the covert narcissists for exactly what they are: stealth predators. Every deep sigh, every silent treatment, every feigned failure with the washing machine, and every single tear they shed during a collapse is part of a calculated, overarching system to extract power and narcissistic supply.
But again, the intention...
They are heavily fortified behind a false external persona. They are entirely lacking in empathy, and they are driven by a fragile ego that literally demands you sacrifice your own reality just to maintain their delusion of superiority. Understanding the precise cold mechanics of how they operate, decoding the blueprint of the predator, is exactly how we dismantle their power over us.
And I maintain that understanding the abuser's pathology is ultimately secondary to understanding the abuse itself. If we over-intellectualize their grandiosity and treat them like criminal masterminds, we risk minimizing the victim's lived, visceral experience of the trauma.
I don't think it minimizes it. I think it explains it.
But the focus must remain squarely on empowering victims to spot those invisible red flags early. The constant guilt-tripping, disguised as depression, the weaponized incompetence, the crazy-making covert gaslighting. Our priority has to be helping the target realize they need to stop walking on eggshells.
I agree with that.
They need to recognize that the tears are bait, the apologies are traps, and they must find the strength to break the trauma bond through strict no contact. Protecting one's sanity isn't about outsmarting the narcissist. It's about walking away from the game entirely.
Well, we both clearly agree that this behavioral pattern is incredibly destructive, highly toxic, and terrifyingly hidden in plain sight.
Yes, absolutely. It operates in the shadows of our most intimate relationships, our marriages, our families, our workplaces, which is exactly what makes it so devastating.
Right.
We may disagree on whether the primary lens should be profiling the predator's calculated pathology or prioritizing the psychological rescue of the victim, but examining both realities is crucial. The damage they leave in their wake is undeniable.
There is vastly more to explore regarding the long-term recovery from covert narcissistic abuse within the clinical literature. Identifying these specific tactics is just the first step in a much longer journey.
It really is. It takes immense courage to look at these deeply ingrained patterns and finally recognize them in your own life.
As we close today, I want to leave you with a thought to turn over in your mind. We started this conversation by picturing a predator as a loud, arrogant aggressor. But if the most dangerous predators don't announce themselves, if they truly navigate the world disguised as the victim, how carefully do you need to look at the people you find yourself constantly apologizing to?